The grand hall of the alien queen's palace echoed with silence. It was a place of immense power, a place where no one dared challenge the authority of its ruler. The walls, adorned with gleaming silver and gold, shimmered in the soft alien light that filtered through the high, arching windows. The queen's throne, elevated and imposing, stood at the far end of the hall, a symbol of her dominance and superiority over all who dared enter her realm. Today, however, something different was about to happen. Standing at the entrance of the palace was a young human soldier, John. His boots clicked against the stone floor, a steady, determined rhythm that filled the silence. The moment he stepped into the hall, a wave of cold air brushed against his face. He was surrounded by towering statues, designed to represent the queen's many victories over other worlds. The room seemed to grow colder as the eyes of the elite alien guards focused on him. These were no ordinary soldiers. They were genetically enhanced warriors, bred for battle. But despite the imposing presence of the guards and the grandeur of the palace, John stood tall, his shoulders squared and his eyes focused. The alien queen sat upon her throne, observing him closely. Her cold, calculating gaze swept over him, sizing him up. She had heard the stories of humans, but they were nothing but myth and legend in her eyes. To her, the human race was weak, easily broken. They had no place in her empire. She had ruled for centuries, and no one had ever dared to defy her. Why would they? She was an eternal ruler, a being of immeasurable power, and she was certain that this human would submit to her will without question. John, however, did not look intimidated. His heart raced with a sense of duty and honor. He was a soldier, and he knew that his mission here today was not one of submission. He had been chosen to represent humanity, to stand before this queen and show her that humans were not to be underestimated. The stories he had heard of the queen's arrogance and cruelty only fueled his determination. The queen's lips curled into a smirk as she stood from her throne. "So you're the one they've sent," she said, her voice cold and commanding. A mere human, how amusing. She took a step forward, her long dark robes trailing behind her like a shadow. "I expected you to kneel to beg for mercy, but I see you stand before me with pride. Tell me, human, do you think you can defeat me?" John did not flinch. His gaze remained fixed on her, unwavering. He was not afraid. "I don't need to defeat you," he replied calmly. "I'm here to show you something you don't understand." The queen's eyes narrowed. She had heard many bold words before, but none from a human. "Show me?" she echoed with disdain. "And what could a weak creature like you possibly show me that would be of any worth?" The atmosphere in the room grew tense. The guards, sensing the rising conflict, moved into position, their weapons drawn. But the queen raised a hand, signaling them to hold their ground. She wanted to see what this human would do. John took a step forward, his eyes still locked with the queen's. He could feel the weight of the situation pressing on him, the realization of the danger that surrounded him, but his resolve never wavered. He was not here to fight. He was here to prove something far greater. "You think of strength as something that can be measured by size or power," John said, his voice steady. "But true strength is not about how many soldiers you have or how big your weapons are. It's about heart. It's about the will to stand up when everyone tells you to fall. It's about refusing to break no matter the odds." The queen let out a soft, almost mocking laugh. "Heart?" she scoffed. "What nonsense. I have crushed entire civilizations, brought down countless enemies. I do not fear a human's heart. I fear nothing." Her voice grew darker. "I have seen entire species fall before me, their hopes and dreams shattered in the blink of an eye. And now you stand here, believing you can challenge me with your heart?" John's expression softened slightly, but his voice remained firm. "I'm not here to challenge you with violence," he said. "I'm here to challenge your perception of strength. You think we are weak because we don't have the same power you do, but you're wrong. The true strength of humanity lies in our ability to survive, to adapt, and to rise above even the most impossible situations." The queen looked at him for a long moment, her expression unreadable. She was intrigued, but not yet convinced. "You speak of things you cannot possibly Understand, she said, her voice growing colder again. You think your strength can match mine? You are nothing compared to the forces that I command. John stood tall, his voice unwavering. I may not have your power, but I have something you can't take away. My will to fight for what's right, and that's something you'll never defeat. For a moment the Queen stood silent. She had faced many enemies, each one trembling before her, begging for mercy. But this one was different. He did not beg. He did not cower. His words had struck something inside her, something she had never expected from a mere human. A flicker of doubt passed through the Queen's mind, though she quickly pushed it away. She would not let herself be swayed by this human's words. But as she looked at him, standing before her with quiet strength and determination, something inside her began to stir. Could this human truly challenge her? The tension in the room was palpable. The guards shifted uneasily, unsure of what would happen next. The Queen's pride had been wounded, but she would not show it. Not yet. The next few moments would decide everything. The air in the grand hall was thick with tension. The alien Queen stood motionless, her icy gaze never leaving John, the human soldier who had just spoken words that shook her confidence. For a moment she thought she might be imagining it, the faint doubt that flickered across her mind. She quickly discarded it, reminding herself of her superiority. She had lived for centuries, crushed countless civilizations, and commanded power unimaginable to most species. This human was nothing more than an insect in comparison. Enough of your nonsense, the Queen snapped, her voice icy and commanding. If you truly think you can stand against me, then show me your strength. I will break you as easily as I have broken so many others. The Queen motioned to her elite guards, signaling them to step forward. They were the finest warriors in the galaxy, trained from birth to be flawless in combat, each one stronger, faster, and more skilled than any normal being. They surrounded John, their armor gleaming in the dim light of the palace hall. John stood alone in the center, but his posture never faltered. His eyes were calm, his chest steady as he took in the sight of the guards. He knew he was vastly outnumbered and the odds were stacked against him. But he also knew that strength was not just about fighting. It was about outthinking your opponent, outmaneuvering them, and using what you had wisely. Let's see if your heart is enough to save you, the Queen said with a sneer, signaling her guards to advance. The guards charged forward with blinding speed, their weapons drawn and their armor seemingly invulnerable. John didn't flinch, but his mind raced. He had no intention of fighting them head-on. He had studied the Queen's army carefully before this moment, watching for weaknesses, observing their movements and patterns. His strategy was simple: outsmart them. As the first guard reached him, John pivoted swiftly to the side, narrowly avoiding the guard's sword as it swung through the air. The guard stumbled slightly, giving John just enough time to move in. In one swift motion, he grabbed the guard's wrist, twisting it with expert precision, disarming him and sending his weapon clattering to the floor. The guard, stunned by the human's unexpected speed and strength, quickly tried to regain control, but John was already moving. Before the guard could react, John kicked him in the chest, sending him flying back into his comrades. The other guards hesitated for a brief moment, unsure of what had just happened. Never before had they seen a human move with such skill, such quickness. John wasn't just a soldier, he was a strategist, using his agility and intelligence to overcome the overwhelming force of the alien warriors. He wasn't trying to overpower them, he was trying to outmaneuver them. He was using their size and strength against them. The second guard charged in, but John was ready. This time he didn't wait for the guard to reach him. Instead, he darted to the side, grabbing a nearby pillar for leverage and used it to swing around behind the guard. In one fluid motion, he wrapped his arm around the guard's neck, putting him in a chokehold. The guard's eyes widened in surprise as he struggled, but John's grip was firm, and with a final twist, he brought the guard to the ground, knocking him unconscious. The other guards were now fully aware that this human was not like any enemy they had ever faced. He didn't fight with brute force, he fought with precision, with speed, and with the kind of tactical genius that could turn any situation in his favor. The queen, watching from her throne, couldn't hide the shock on her face. This human was defeating her best soldiers and she couldn't understand how. The third and fourth guards advanced together, attempting to flank him. John, however, anticipated their move. With a quick glance at their formation, he realized the space between them was too narrow for them to move freely. Instead of charging at them directly, John waited until they were in range, then dropped low to the ground and slid between their legs. The guards, caught off guard, turned to face him, but by then, it was too late. John was already on the move, again, taking advantage of their momentary confusion. With incredible speed, he struck one guard in the back of the knees, forcing him to the ground, while the other guard swung blindly at him, missing by inches. John used the momentum of the missed attack to propel himself forward, landing a perfect punch to the guard's jaw, knocking him out cold. The room was now eerily quiet. The remaining guard stood frozen, watching the human, who was now breathing steadily, his eyes sharp and focused. The queen, who had been confident in her soldiers' abilities, now looked uncertain. Her perfect warriors, the ones who had never failed her, were being defeated by a single human soldier. Her pride, once unshakable, began to crumble. John stood, in the center of the room, his eyes never leaving the queen. He was bruised, but he was standing. The guards lay unconscious around him, their weapons scattered. He hadn't fought with pure force, he had fought with strategy, using his environment, his agility, and his intelligence to outmaneuver them at every turn. He had proven that strength wasn't just about power. It was about knowing how to use what you had. The queen's expression shifted. Her arrogance was gone, replaced by something else, a grudging respect. She had underestimated this human, and now she was forced to recognize his strength. But it wasn't just his physical abilities that had impressed her. It was his mind, his ability to think and act in the face of danger, that had truly set him apart. As the queen sat back down on her throne, her gaze never leaving John, she spoke, in a quieter, more measured tone. "I have seen many things in my time, but never have I witnessed such strength, such skill from a human. You have my respect, soldier. You have proven that humans are not as weak as I believed." John nodded, still standing tall. "I told you," he said softly. "True strength is not just about power. It's about heart. It's about standing firm when everything else tells you to fall." The room was silent, but the tension in the air was palpable. The queen was no longer just an invincible ruler. She was now facing a human who had shown her that even the strongest can be humbled. And for the first time, the queen wondered if there was more to strength than she had ever realized. The air in the grand hall felt heavier now, thick with the weight of the queen's stunned silence. Her throne loomed high above the scattered, unconscious forms of her elite guards. She had watched as John, the human soldier, had taken down her strongest warriors with nothing more than his wits and speed. For the first time in her life, she felt a deep sense of uncertainty, an emotion she had long considered beneath her. The once unshakable confidence she had built over centuries of conquest now wavered. John stood motionless in the center of the room, his chest heaving with controlled breaths, his eyes locked on the queen. His presence was unyielding, a stark contrast to the fear and confusion slowly spreading through the queen's mind. She had always been a conqueror, accustomed to overwhelming any opponent with ease, but this human was different. His resilience had shattered her expectations, and now, standing before her, he seemed to radiate a strength she had never before encountered in a species she had long considered inferior. For a moment, there was no sound in the hall except for the soft echoes of John's breathing. The queen's gaze remained fixed on him, her lips slightly parted, unable to fully process what had just occurred. She could not deny it any longer. This human was unlike anything she had ever faced. His skill in combat was undeniable, but it was his mindset, his relentless determination, that had truly broken her soldiers. Finally, after what seemed like an eternity, the queen rose from her throne, her movements slow and deliberate. She stepped down the stairs, each footstep echoing in the vast chamber, her regal presence still commanding the space. The guards who had previously surrounded her now lay motionless, their pride shattered along with their bodies. She glanced at them briefly, her mind racing. Never before had her warriors been defeated so thoroughly. But it wasn't just the physical defeat that disturbed her. It was the message that this human had sent. His defiance, his calm confidence, had pierced through her arrogance like a sword through cloth. You are not what I expected, the Queen said, her voice laced with a mixture of disbelief and reluctant admiration. She stopped a few paces from John, her gaze still fixed on him. No human has ever stood before me like this. I have crushed entire civilizations, defeated species far stronger than you. Yet you remain. John stood still, his expression neutral. He was not arrogant. He had no need to gloat. He had simply done what was necessary to prove a point. I told you, he said calmly. True strength doesn't come from size or weapons. It comes from the heart. From the will to stand when everything tells you to fall. From never giving up, no matter how tough things get. The Queen's eyes narrowed as she absorbed his words. The way he spoke, with such quiet conviction, stirred something inside her. It was a feeling she couldn't quite identify, but it unsettled her. Her entire life she had been told that power was the ultimate force, that those who held power were destined to rule. And yet, here stood this human, small, insignificant, in her eyes, showing her that true strength lay in something beyond her understanding. She took a step back, her mind racing. The pride that had been her guiding force for centuries was beginning to crumble. She had always believed that her power, her intelligence, and her ability to conquer were enough to ensure her reign would last forever. But now, she was beginning to question everything she had ever known. You speak of strength, the Queen said, her voice quieter now, almost reflective. But you have no idea what it means to truly rule. Power is not just about survival or defiance. It is about control. It is about bending the universe to your will. My power is not just physical. It is absolute. John looked at her, his eyes softening. He had no desire to challenge her for the sake of pride or power. He wasn't here to conquer. He was here to make her understand something important. You're right, he said, his voice calm and steady. True power isn't about control. It's about influence, the ability to inspire others to rise above their circumstances. The greatest rulers don't break those around them. They lift them up. The Queen's brow furrowed, and she crossed her arms, pondering his words. She had never thought about power in this way before. In all her years of conquest, she had never been faced with the idea that power could be used for something other than domination. She had crushed rebellions, conquered worlds, and silenced entire civilizations, but none of that had made her feel what John's words stirred in her now. Was it possible that she had misunderstood what true strength meant? The Queen walked slowly around him, observing John from every angle. She had faced countless enemies, each one trembling before her, each one begging for mercy. But this human, who had just brought her most powerful warriors to their knees, stood before her with humility, not arrogance. There was a quiet strength in him that she could not ignore. You don't fear me, the Queen said almost to herself. No one has ever stood before me without fear. And yet you remain unfazed. John's eyes met hers, his expression unwavering. I don't fear you. I fear what happens if I don't stand up. Fear is what keeps us from doing what's right, and if I'm afraid, then I've already lost. The Queen was silent for a long time. Her thoughts swirled, a storm of confusion, pride, and something new. Something she had never experienced before. It was the realization that in all her years of ruling, she had never truly understood the human spirit. She had thought her power would keep her invincible, that nothing could touch her, that no one could ever stand up to her. But this human had proven her wrong. For the first time in her long life, the Queen found herself questioning her own beliefs. Had she been so focused on control and power that she had missed the deeper truth? Had she misunderstood what it meant to be truly strong? The room was quiet as the realization sank in. The Queen had been humbled, but not in a way that destroyed her pride. Instead, it had sparked something deeper, an understanding that strength came not just from dominating others, but from lifting them up, from inspiring them to rise and face challenges together. As the Queen slowly lowered her gaze, she finally spoke, her voice no longer cold and commanding, but soft, almost respectful. "Perhaps you're right," she murmured. "Perhaps I have been wrong all these years." John stood tall, his expression calm. "We all learn from our mistakes. It's never too late to change." The Queen looked at him for a long moment, and for the first time she saw him, not as an enemy but as a symbol of something more powerful than she had ever understood. Hope. The tension in the room finally began to ease, and for the first time the Queen felt a strange sense of peace wash over her. The human had taught her something she never expected to learn, and in that quiet moment she realized that perhaps, just perhaps, it was time for her to rethink her definition of true strength. The grand hall was now filled with a heavy silence, but the air no longer felt oppressive. The Queen stood before John, no longer just a ruler of immense power, but a figure of deep contemplation. For the first time in her life, she was uncertain. Her entire existence had been built upon the belief that power was synonymous with control. Control over others, control over her fate, control over the universe. But the human who stood before her had shown her a different kind of power. Power that came not from domination, but from resilience, from courage, and from an unwavering belief in one's own worth. As the Queen gazed at John, a shift occurred within her. Her towering pride, which had once seemed unbreakable, began to crumble. It was not a defeat that she feared, but a realization that her definition of strength had been entirely wrong. For centuries she had conquered and ruled, taking what she wanted with force, leaving nothing but ashes in her wake. But now she found herself questioning everything she had known. The room remained still as the two of them stood face to face, neither of them speaking. The tension that had once been thick enough to cut through with a blade had begun to dissipate, replaced by something far more profound: understanding. John stood quietly, his eyes soft but steady. He hadn't come to this palace to fight or to win in the traditional sense. His mission had always been about showing the Queen something far greater than physical strength, the strength of the human spirit, the power of unity, and the courage to stand against the odds. He had succeeded in what he came to do, but he wasn't there to gloat or celebrate. He was simply there to make the Queen understand that true power wasn't something you could rule over. It was something that lived within each individual. After what felt like an eternity, the Queen broke the silence, her voice soft but firm. "You have defeated me in ways I never thought possible, human," she said, her words carrying a weight of reluctant admiration. "I thought power was about control, about crushing others beneath me. But you have shown me that there is another way, a way that requires more courage, more strength than I ever thought I possessed." John met her gaze, his eyes filled with a quiet respect. "It's never too late to change," he said softly, his voice filled with sincerity. "We all make mistakes, but the greatest strength lies in learning from them, in choosing to do better, to be better." The Queen nodded slowly, her eyes reflecting a mix of emotions. She had spent her entire existence focused on domination, believing that strength meant bending others to her will. But now she realized how empty that definition was. She could crush entire worlds, defeat armies, and claim dominion over the galaxy. But none of that would make her truly strong. True strength, she now understood, was in the ability to grow, to change, and to inspire others to do the same. With a deep breath, the Queen straightened, her posture still regal, but something about her had shifted. She wasn't the same ruthless ruler who had first entered the hall. There was a vulnerability now in her eyes, a recognition of her own humanity, something she had long denied. For the first time, she saw herself as part of something larger than her own ambition. She saw herself as a leader, not just because of her power, but because of her ability to inspire those around her. Perhaps I have been wrong all along," the Queen admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. "I have ruled with fear, with control, because that's all I ever knew. But now I see that true leadership is not about domination. It's about trust, about unity, and about empowering others to be their best selves." John nodded in quiet, understanding. He had known this moment would come. The Queen had always been a leader, but she had been lost in the illusion of power. Now she had found her true strength. For a moment, there was no need for words. Both the Queen and John stood there, silently acknowledging the profound change that had just occurred. The Queen had been humbled, but she was not broken. She had learned something far more valuable than any victory. She had learned the true meaning of strength. After a few moments of silence, the Queen turned towards her throne, the weight of her newfound understanding settling into her heart. She glanced over her fallen guards who lay unconscious at the edges of the hall. Their faces no longer reflected fear, but confusion. They had never seen their Queen like this. They had never seen her vulnerable, unsure. But in that uncertainty there was strength. The Queen raised her hand, signaling her guards to stand. Slowly they rose, their faces still clouded with disbelief. But there was a shift in the atmosphere. The Queen, who had once ruled through fear, now saw the potential for a different kind of leadership, a leadership built on mutual respect and understanding. She turned back to John. "You have shown me a new way, human," she said, her voice filled with both gratitude and awe. "I will not forget what you have taught me, and for that I will spare your life. You and your people will not be destroyed by my hand." John's eyes softened, and he gave a small nod. "Thank you," he said quietly. "But it's not about sparing my life. It's about learning from each other and moving forward together." The Queen studied him for a moment before responding. "Perhaps we can do that. Perhaps we can both change." In the quiet that followed, something incredible happened. The Queen, once a symbol of tyranny, began to transform before John's eyes. She was no longer a ruler who crushed her enemies, but a leader who would guide her people with wisdom and understanding. And John, the humble soldier, had played a pivotal role in helping her see the truth. As John turned to leave the hall, he felt a deep sense of fulfillment. His mission had been successful, not through violence or force, but through the quiet power of resilience and compassion. He had shown the Queen that strength wasn't about domination. It was about the ability to change, to grow, and to inspire others to rise with you. And as the grand hall echoed with the sounds of the Queen's new leadership, John knew that this moment would be remembered for generations to come. A moment when humanity's true strength had shone through, and an alien queen had learned the most important lesson of all. That power without compassion is nothing, but power with compassion can change the universe.